The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Sorry I am late. I had to reboot my computer and then I had trouble getting back in to go to webinar right before we got started. So it's a Monday kind of sort of for me. So welcome everybody. Today's topic is going to be an overview of Carlson Takeoff and Takeoff Suite. Let's just make sure everybody on the call knows how to get your questions answered here today. So you should have that GoToWebinar control panel docked on the right side of your screen, somewhere where my mouse is circling. And there's a vertical toolbar that hangs off the side of that with a hand icon at the bottom. And if you have a question during the session, you can use that to raise your hand. And I will look for that. And once I see it, I'll unmute your microphone and we'll talk back and forth and hopefully get your question answered. Let's just make sure that everybody's able to hear me. So if you're able to hear me, how about raising your hand? Use that button. Cool. Thank you. I see all those hands going up. So I'm going to put your hand down for now. If you don't have a microphone, you can also type your question in there at the bottom. So all right, so let me just go ahead and qualify this up front. So there are a couple of other webinars that I do on a fairly regular basis. One is an introduction to CAD Net, and another is surface modeling with SiteNet and takeoff menus, where I go and also like making models from a mess. And then next week, I think it is, we've got Walt Lyles coming in to do drawing cleanup. So a lot of what I'm going to kind of mention today, I'm not going to get into depth on those topics since there are other webinars for that. If anybody doesn't have access to the last posted recording of those, just let me know. So I'm going to try to make this a little bit different, hit some different things. So we'll see how that goes. All right, upcoming webinars. Next week on the 2nd, we've got our first of the month setting, setup, configuration, and points. And then, as I said, Walt Lyles will be doing drawing cleanup for model building. So Walt works with Terrain Technology. He is a prior Carlson software sales rep and also trainer, good guy. But he and Ashton with Terrain Technology do model building and takeoffs. I think they're out of the Atlanta area. So anyway, he's kind of a pro at this stuff, so he'll be doing that. Still think I'm going to add something else for November, but I'm still trying to get some of the other training worked out, so I'm slack on that. Because our hands-on training coming up in Raleigh. I've mentioned these before and I'm late, so I'm just going to kind of leave this here for a quick second. There are still some spots on the 19th, 20th, December 1st, and December 2nd, if anybody's interested. These are limited seating, hands-on, bring your own computer kind of thing. And then the virtual workshops, this is what I'm going to have mostly in December. If you're going to be eligible to attend these for free if you've attended, I think, at least one in the last 3 months of the normal webinars. You'd be able to attend this one for free. So we'll see how it goes. Rather than our 100-person workshops, we're going to do it virtually. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about Takeoff and Takeoff Suite. So Carlson Takeoff is the product that Carlson puts out primarily for construction professionals, and it can use CAD files. It lets you digitize, lets you do takeoffs, model building for GPS guided machine control systems. But civil designers have a lot of use in this as well. There is a lot of overlap, which I'm going to cover next. With Carlson Civil and Civil Suite. So we'll talk about that. So if you've ever used Paydirt, if you're in construction, use Paydirt, use Agtek, I'm trying to remember what the other one, Quest. Those are really expensive. Relatively speaking, these are not the Carlson Takeoff programs. Retail price for Carlson Takeoff with embedded AutoCAD is $9,000, and the suite with embedded IntelliCAD is $7,500. So they're the same program. You get all the same functionality. One's with embedded AutoCAD, one's with IntelliCAD. So I know that, I've always focused, believe it or not, I got started with Carlson really more on the takeoff side, but ended up more on the civil side. So I know that we've got a lot of folks here that use the civil suite or those products, the survey, civil, hydrology, and GIS. And so I get questions a lot on, if we want to do machine control models for some of our, maybe new clients, maybe we want to open up a new division, what do I need? The 4 products that are in the Takeoff Suite are Carlson Construction, GeoTek, CADNet, and Trench. So like I said, there is a lot of overlap. I'll show you some of that when we get into the program, but for now I've got a few more slides. So here's your biggest expense when you're talking about the software. So if you have Civil Suite, you've got Survey and Civil, and almost right down the line, the programs in Carlson Construction are the same as what's in Survey and Civil. So why is that important? Well, the whole Civil Suite, I'm going to talk just round numbers here. The whole Civil Suite costs $39.50. That's the retail price. My price is a little cheaper. Carlson Construction by itself, just that, is $39.50. Well, if you've already got 2 pieces, you get all 4 of the Civil Suite for this. So if you've already got Civil Suite, you've got the bulk of the Takeoff Suite. Is that all you need? Takeoff Suite is modular. If you wanted, you could add construction to your Civil Suite, but you're duplicating. For the most part, if you are getting into this side, if you're buying from scratch, for the most part, the only other piece you're really going to need is CADNet. So what CADNet lets you do is get paper plans or electronic copies of plans, so PDF files or images of your sheets into CAD. So Carlson CADNet lets you do the digitizing, or if you have images that have been created from a CAD file, sometimes you can just extract the CAD file back out of that PDF or that image. So I think if you're looking at doing model building, if you are looking at doing takeoffs, at a minimum, you're going to need construction and CADNet or survey, civil, and CADNet. So GeoTek, if you work with soil borings, if you are somewhere not here and not in North Carolina for the most part, at least where I am, but if you end up having geotechnical reports and soil boring data where you know how deep you've got rock and you need to have that as part of your quantity reports, then GeoTek is what you can do. And then trench, if you're a utility contractor and you need to quantify trenching depths, have reporting, how much for bedding that you need, Carlson trench, you could add that. What I see most of the time for people that are just getting into this, again, it's survey, civil, and CADNet, or construction and CADNet. With the option, you can always add GeoTek and Trench at a later date as modules. So are there any questions? Okay, so you can kind of see here, this is just a little bit of a summary on what you can do in construction versus survey and civil. So if you really need to focus on survey, you shouldn't get construction instead. If you really need to focus on civil, you shouldn't get construction instead. So that's where you're going to get your advanced features. But here's the big one. So you've got your programs up top. So Takeoff OEM or the Takeoff Suite, for the most part, if you're in construction, if you're doing estimating, you probably want to focus on that. What I've tried to do, and this came from Carlson, but I kind of modified it a little bit just to highlight some things. What I looked for is in the two right-hand columns for again, I'm going from the assumption that a lot of you on this call have survey and civil, and you may be considering what else you need. So if you have survey and civil, let's look down here, and where we need to see if we need to add things is if we see no and no. So for instance, if you want to do paper plan digitizing, you can't do it in survey and civil. You can't even do it in construction. You'd want to add CAD net. Do you want to have drill hole data, borehole data? You may need to add GeoTak. If you need to do trenching, you may need to add trench. So here are the things in red that you can get from construction that you cannot get from survey and civil, and that's going to be any kind of over excavation, surface volumes, just on your volume report, special imports and reports, I'm not sure what that is, and quick graphic reports. It's just kind of a quick and easy menu I can show you. And then also further down here, PDF import and then raster to vector. So that would again be just the addition of CAD net if you're already sitting on and have survey and civil. Also, when I do, a lot of times I don't have much data on the PowerPoints. I know that I have a lot here. So I have created a handout if anybody's interested in the PowerPoint that I've got. I've already put it out. I've created a PDF where I exported that. So if anybody's interested and you really want to take a look at these a little bit more, but this is a good breakdown here showing you what all the stuff that you would get from Takeoff or the suite versus each of the different modules. All right, so any questions on that? Okay, so let's get into the program. Okay, so let's just start up a blank drawing here. I'm not even gonna start it with a new drawing name. So here's my menu bar. So the first four are going to be survey, civil, hydrology, and GIS, and then we've got our geotech menu. If I switch to that, and I kind of say this on pretty much every webinar, I think, that your first about 7 menus are going to be identical from file over to points, regardless of which program you're in. You're always going to have that. So after you go past the points pull down menu is where you're going to start seeing different menus that are specific to the module. So drill hole, StrataCalc, grids, and maps. Okay. And then trench, let's look at it real quick. We've got a trench pull down and a utility network pull down. We have construction, which is going to be very similar to some of the menus in civil. So I'll point that out here in a minute. But first, let's start with CAD net. So just another similarity that I will bring up at this time is for any of you coming from the Autodesk world, Carlson CADnet is going to be pretty similar to what Autodesk has with their Raster Design program. CADnet is the program where Carlson has collected all their tools that get paper plans into CAD. Okay, so that can come in a few different ways. If you have an actual digitizer where you have to tape down paper plans and you need to digitize, you do that in CADnet. If you get a PDF of the project plan sheets and you need to insert them so that you can digitize on screen, you do that in CAD-NET. If you have an engineer that emails you a PDF that they created from their CAD file, and you want to extract vector or line work or CAD data from the PDF or from the image straight into CAD, you do that in CAD-NET. So that's what we do here. So again, not unique to any menu. In the file menu, you're still always going to have your ability to import like DGN files if you get land XML files with data. Polyline files can come in from Google. Well, actually, we got Google down here. What am I trying to think of with the Polyline file? I think it's an LN3 file that TopCon creates, okay? Same, you can export. All that's in your file menu. But let's look at some of our options for images. Okay, yeah, so I've got some down here. So let's just look at and just make sure everybody's clear on what we're talking about with different types of files. Now this happens to be a PDF file. I've got two at the bottom, a raster PDF and then a vector PDF. So a raster PDF is basically like it's been printed out on paper and then it's been scanned in. So these are really just going to end up being pixels. So one thing that you can kind of tell is in your Adobe Viewer is what I'm using. You don't have the ability to see what the layers are in a raster drawing. Now there's a way to turn that off if somebody exports and sends this to you, so that's not absolute. But most likely if you can't see a list of layers over here, it'll more likely be a raster type PDF or image. But here's an example of what I'm talking about. So this is a vectorized PDF file. Notice over here that I've got this icon and it actually shows all the layers. So if you get a PDF or an image where you can see these layers, you can essentially just extract all this right into your CAD file using Carlson CAD-NET. So sometimes this takes a little bit of time. So I've cheated a little bit. And so I'm just going to end up opening those drawings so you can see. But here's the commands that you would go through. So I'm in CAD-NET here. So if you have an image, a PDF, you would go to import PDF. If you have other kinds of raster files, you would do that here. But I'm going to start with an import PDF. Again, I'm really not going to go too far on this, but I want you to see the menus. So here's what the raster looks like. Okay, so that's that raster image. All right, so notice that I've got an option to insert it as an image, or I have an option to vectorize and insert. So if I vectorize and insert, vectorize just means that I'm going to turn it into line work in my drawing. So notice that when it pops this up, raster to vector conversion. So this is it's just a picture. It's going to do its best. One of your keys to look for is that the only layer it knows is one layer. So when it creates this, it's going to put everything on that layer. Again, I'm going to short circuit that a little bit here. And so here is one that I had already done. So if we were to use CAD-NET to convert this raster to vector, this is what we get. So this is line work. So when we zoom in, it doesn't look so good, does it? So, you know, your contours are still in pieces. Okay, so it's not great. It is in CAD, but how usable is it? Don't know. Don't really know that that's very usable. So again, I'll stop this before I get too far, but now let's look at what options we get through CADNet if we try to import that vectorized. So I've already identified just by opening the PDF, I already knew it had vector entities in it, but look at the difference. So keep PDF layers. So when I import this, I'm going to keep all those layers we saw here, okay? It'll do some joining, it'll reduce vertices, it's got a lot of stuff that it'll do. Notice I can insert the line work here. So let me just open that drawing that was created from the vector PDF. So the bonus is that everything's on layers, okay? If I isolate these existing contours, you know, they are layerized. But if you zoom in, you know, this is still line work. It's not text. These are still in pieces, but it's much nicer. It's much cleaner. It is layered. And Carlson does give you some options here to convert polylines to text and convert dashes to polylines. So for instance, I can go in here and give it 2 segments of the polyline. And then maybe I can window around it. Let me see how much I can get. I don't want to do too much. But you can see it has connected some of this for me. So it's you can get a lot more from this. You could do the same with your polylines and your buffers. So it's not great, obviously, if you can ever get the CAD file. That's going to be, you know, a lot more user-friendly. You'll be able to get a lot more from that quickly. I would also say this is just, and for those of you really interested in this, definitely advise you to join us next week with Walt. You know, if I'm recommending that somebody do, that they're doing a takeoff and they just need estimated quantities and all you get is a PDF, I'm going to recommend that you just probably take the time to digitize it because there's so much cleanup that's going to be involved in this. That's still digitizing is probably going to be my recommendation. So do you have any questions? Okay, so I'm actually going to close these. So I'll just repeat too that if anybody really wants, you know, more of a primer and wants to dig in on CADNet, let me know. I'll make the last webinar that I did available to you. All right, so let's just quickly look at how digitizing would work. So I'll start a new drawing. And let's just set that, see where I am. Okay, so CADNet, and I'll just put today's date. Okay. Okay, so I am going to just go to my PDF importer, and I am going to use, I'll use that raster image. I'm not going to try to vectorize it, I just want it as an image. So notice too that Carlson doesn't actually treat it and keep it as a PDF. It does convert it to a TIFF file right up front. And so I'm just going to pick a point. I don't know what a scale would be, but if I zoom out, I can see, and this is just one entity. It's basically just a picture of that plan sheet. And if I'm just trying to get dirt quantities, you know, somebody that's been doing this for a long time and just needs quantity of curb or, you know, your building pad and what kind of subgrade volumes you have, your pavement quantities, sidewalk quantities, things like that, you can digitize this very quickly, okay? Carlson does make that very nice and very easy to do. The first thing we would want to do is just double check the scale. We just popped it in here because it's a picture of our plan sheet. And so we do need to make sure it's scaled properly so that any quantities we try to take off are going to be accurate. So I'm going to check the scale, finding a bar scale. I'm just going to do an old time CAD command of D for distance, and you can see it does not scale out to be 20 feet. It's some fraction of that or multiple of that. So I can use just Carlson Scale Wizard command to kind of do that pretty easily. That's probably the same one. But I can do the entire drawing. This is the only thing in here. And I'll scale it by screen picking. And I'm going to line up my crosshair just with the left edge. And then line up my crosshair with the left edge and tell it that that distance should be 20 feet. All right, and then let's just double check that distance again. I'll check here and here. Oh, I don't know why there we go. And I think I just didn't snap very well. So I'm basically ready to just start digitizing now. So let me hit save on my drawing. I'm going to check under Digitize again. I'm still in CADNet, and I can go to my Digitizer settings. And if, like I said, if you're somebody that still has the old actual Digitizer board, you wouldn't want to use this as a mouse, but we're doing what we call heads-up digitizing here, where we have the image on screen. So I'm going to use a mouse as my digitizer. And I'm not going to do much. I'm just going to do enough to give you an idea of how this works. So when you start putting CAD entities in the drawing as line work, polylines, points, whatever, spot elevations, you want to start up here and just let it know if you are putting in information that needs to be considered existing or design or other. Okay, maybe you have phase work to do, which is how other would be, or if it just doesn't fit, if it's unneeded, or just needs to be separated out as opposed to existing or design, you can put things on other. So what I'm going to start with, I'm just going to kind of half do an existing contour. Okay, and oh, sorry. So I set it to existing, and then I have to go down and tell it I want to do a contour polyline. So you can see here the target set to existing, and then here it defaults to a layer name, the interval if I'm doing 1 foot or 2 feet or every 5 feet. Okay, here I can put in what elevation I want to start at, and I actually don't know. Let's just find one here. So I've got a 277, so that's what I had already. So 277, and then pick the first point. So I can just be as careful as I want to be to put this in. Again, if I was doing this for real, I would take a lot more time and care to it, but that's it. Okay, then it asks, I hit my enter key to finish, and it automatically goes up, and it gets me ready for the next one, which will be somewhere else, which is not even here. So I can actually change the elevation to 276 and do my next one if I want. Okay, and so that's it. So you do your existing contours. I'm going to end that. And if I use Carlson's Drawing Inspector and hover over that, you can see it has elevated those polylines, okay? And then I do the same thing with proposed. So I've got a couple proposed, nothing different. I'm just going to tell it it's a design surface. So it sets it to the design surface, and then I will digitize a contour polyline. Again, you can see it's put it on a different layer. And right over here, I've got a 274. And again, oh, well, that was awful. So I'm trying to go quick on this part because it's boring. And that's it. So I don't think this is going to be anything really new to too many people. But you just go through that, do all your contours, and save. Then if you have, let's see, I've still got my design surface set. And then let's say that I've got a 2D polyline that's going to be my, let's see here. Let's do this as BOC. Well, let's do, what did it say? Final BOC. Let's just set that color to something that I'll be able to see a little bit. And let me maybe set the width of the polyline just so I can see it. So maybe in here, I'm going to do a 0 elevation because you can see I've got spot elevations. So I'm going to put everything in at 0 to begin with. Now I don't have to do that. If I know all the elevations and I'm sure I can get them when I digitize, I can do that. But I'm going to do these at 2D 0 elevation. Oh, that's really big. I guess I've done one before. I can put an arc. I can do this a lot closer if I wanted to. All right, so you just do that. Okay, I'm not going to do another one. It's the same thing. I've got a building pad over here, so I know the elevation. It is a flat elevation, so I may put this in as a 2D polyline and do it here as BLDG, and then I think it's going to ask me the elevation. Yep, so elevation is 274.67, and so that's all it is. So very standard digitizing. You would go through this. In the end, you would have, oh, sorry, one last thing. Digitize spot elevations and final spot text. That's fine. I don't need a prefix unless I'm going to do these. Maybe I do something like that where I'm going to go in and put these with different descriptions. And maybe 276 here. And I don't know, something else, okay? So you give it all your elevations, okay? And no idea. I was gonna freeze my image. I guess it's on that. Yep, there we go. So that's what I'm left with, okay? So I have some contours that have elevation, and then I'm going to end up with polylines for back curb, buildings, things like that, that don't. So I'm going to have to use the software some other way in order to elevate all this stuff. Questions? All right, so let me jump over now to let's look at my original drawing that I have here. So this has only been cleaned up to the extent that you can see all the tabs down at the bottom. I took off like the company name, the engineering name, and that kind of thing. So for the most part, this is a file that came in, and I think we needed to do a surface model on this for machine control, but it's kind of a mess. So I've jumped ships here a little bit. So let me just make sure that you understand. So if you are doing this for estimating and takeoff purposes, you're going to end up most likely with some cleanup that needs to be done in your drawing, and you're going to end up with some elevating that needs to be done. You're going to have 2D entities that to get accurate surface models, to stake by or to get quantities from, you're going to need to elevate that stuff. When you're at the building stage where you've actually gotten the contract and you're ready to model it, most likely you're going to get a CAD file that you're still going to need a lot of work. The good thing is you should be able to find somewhere in here all your polylines and things. Are they going to be on good layers? Probably not. Are they going to be elevated? Maybe, maybe not. Is the geometry going to be good? Will endpoints connect? Will they be polylines? Probably not. So, you will have to do cleanup. You will have to do elevating 2D to 3D. So I'm going to show you a couple things. So we are going to be in construction here. The things I'm getting ready to show you in Carlson Construction are also in Carlson Civil. They may be in a different menu, but if you have Civil, you've got what I'm getting ready to show you. So let's just take a quick peek at what this drawing has that I may need to work on before it'll actually suit my purposes. So it's got a lot of layers. If we look here, look at all these layers. They came in right from the, architect in some cases. So you can see I've got furniture and refrigerator and all kinds of stuff. I'm going to turn on all my layers so you can just see how much of a mess this is. All right, I'm going to undo that. And then let's focus a little bit instead of the whole drawing. So we know that we need to kind of clean all that stuff up just to get things working well for us. But if I zoom in here and isolate my existing contours, we would hope that these would at least be elevated. And it looks like they are. It looks like they're mostly polylines, so that's good. I should be able to make a surface from this pretty easily. So I'd want to look at this in 3D, make sure it's good. And if I turn it on its side, it looks like almost everything is good. So I've got one thing that's kind of a bad elevation down here that's going to really mess up my dirt work. So even when it looks and appears that everything's good, always do these checks to make sure. There is let's just look. Let's just keep going. Let's isolate and look at my proposed contours, which are in here. And so these are even worse. You can already tell it. You can see that they're in pieces. You can also see that it doesn't look like they're elevated. If we look at these in 3D, we've got spikes. If I go over here and turn off my flag here, my setting to ignore zeros, you can see how much of a mess this is. So elevation wise, even my contours are in pretty bad shape here. That's going to need a lot of fixing. Most of the time, what's going to be easier here is to put everything at 0, make sure everything is flat, 0 elevation, and then re-elevate everything. We've got tools to do contours that are in a series, to do contours that have elevation labels. Some other problems that we'll likely have to address are things like our curb lines. These are sometimes connected, sometimes they're in pieces. They're all at 0 elevation. We've got spot elevations in some places, not in every place. If we look at these in 3D, are we going to have to clean all this up? Yeah. Now it looks like everything's pretty much at 0. Okay, so that's at least good. But anyway, regardless, whether you are digitizing everything from some kind of a paper or electronic plan, or whether you get a drawing from others, you're going to need to do some cleanup. So, 2 places. Any Carlson program, if you go under the File menu, you can see Drawing Cleanup here. If you're using Carlson Construction has a takeoff pull down, and you've got a project checklist, and then you have Drawing Cleanup is almost the very top thing. So this is what Walt's going to go through with you next week and just kind of show you. I mean, I'm not a fan of running all these options on the whole drawing at one time, but this is a really handy routine. If you're going to do a whole lot of options up here, then I would recommend you only do a selection set at a time, maybe just what I've got on my screen and run through some or all of these. If I want to do the entire drawing at one time, I would only do a couple of these. So we'll see what Walt says. But, there are things here to, bind your references, remove any empty layers, join line work, anything outside of the range, it'll move it to 0 so you've got to go elevate it. So a lot of really good stuff here. Any questions on drawing cleanup? All right, so everybody's got that. If you have Carlson, you've got access to that. So that would be your next step. And then after you get to the cleanup and get through the cleanup, the next thing you're probably going to need to do is do some elevating. You're going to need good elevations for existing data and good elevations for proposed data. If you look in construction under this Elevate menu, you're going to see all kinds of tools to elevate, just change elevations, set polylines to elevations, 2D to 3D polyline by surface model, screen entities, points, all kinds of things, okay? If you need to elevate contours, I mentioned this earlier, from multiple in a series to contour labels, different things. Now, let's talk about Carlson Civil versus Carlson Construction. You see that here in construction, you have an elevate menu with all this. You have a takeoff menu with all of these things. The surface menu is kind of short, but you've got takeoff with all of this. So let's just switch over to Carlson Civil for a second. There's no elevate menu, but there's a 3D data, and it's actually longer, so it does have some things, at least under this menu, that one doesn't. All right. So you've got your assigned contour elevations, all your 2D to 3D. So it's very, very similar. They just called it something different. In construction, it's elevate. In civil, it's 3D data. So you've got a surface menu, and then you've got SiteNet. So in Carlson Civil, you don't have a takeoff menu, but you've got SiteNet. Now at the very top, you don't see a checklist. That's definitely missing. You don't see drawing cleanup, but we already know that we've got drawing cleanup over here, okay? But these are the 2 most important menus in construction, okay? So let's switch over to construction. We'll just kind of spend our time there. So this is what I've got. Now I'm going to open up a cleaned up drawing. And so the difference here is that I literally took that exact drawing and I consolidated most of those layers. You remember how much there were on the other one. So I am left with just a handful of layers. Whatever layers you know, Jeremy Taylor uses on his drawings that I get from him, it doesn't matter. I know that when I'm going through this process, the consistency on my side is going to be key. So I have just changed these layer names or created new ones or consolidated or what have you, and made them something I know to work with. So let's just look at what I've got. I am going to go through kind of quickly here. Layer inspector. So you can see what's on each layer. So I've got one layer that's 2D, so that's 0 elevation building pads. Okay. I've got a 2D layer for back of curb. So notice that this is open at the end. My islands have a back of curb polyline there. I'm going to end up using this layer to get my linear footage for back of curb. Now I have a back of curb topsoil. So it's the same layer. The only difference is that I've kind of closed this off so that it is a closed area so that I can get a quantity of topsoil. So I just had to copy that layer, all right? And I'll explain that in a little bit. 2D edge of pavement. In a lot of these cases, I just needed to clean up and get 2D 0 elevation line work. Then I had those spot elevations that I used to elevate those for my proposed surface. So I think that's the only way I'm going to use that 2D edge of pavement. 2D retaining wall. Again, this is a case where it's there, but I used it with my 3D points so that I could elevate it to get my proposed surface. Same way with sidewalk. But I do have a 3D back of curb polyline. This is going to be part of my proposed surface, so it is elevated. My 3D edge of pavement is going to be used for my surface. Notice it's closed. So the other thing that's going to do is give me a volume quantity for my subgrades. So stone, asphalt, things like that. Same with my 3D pad. Anything with a 3D is going to be used for my proposed surface. And anything that's closed, I'll be able to use it for quantity volumes as well. I've got proposed spot elevations. So I think what you'll notice here is I ended up creating on my own. The ones they gave me were so crazy and created differently and not consistent that I had to make on my own. Sometimes that has to happen. There's my 3D polylines for my walls. There's a layer for demolition for fence and demolition for trees to be removed. There's those existing contours, limits of construction, and then there's the proposed contours. So I cleaned it up. If I check my 3D viewer now, I should either have everything elevated. What's not elevated should be a 0 elevation. So you can see, and everything's exaggerated here about 3 times. So very steep slope back here. Oh, that's my existing surface polygon or contours, okay. All right, so how do we get to quantities? How do we get to surface models from here? Now we're really about to take advantage of this takeoff menu. So first thing, looking at my checklist, define your layer, target material, and subgrades, okay? So remember back when we were digitizing, and when we were digitized, we had to toggle between an existing surface information and final or design surface information. So that's going to come into play here. So everything with Carlson Takeoff, it's a layer-based feature or utility. And so when you come in here, by default, every layer in the drawing shows up on this tab called Other. I've got an existing tab, I've got a design tab. I mentioned earlier that you may have phases, so you can actually create additional targets. So you would have different tabs up here if you need, phase, I don't know, other reasons you would use it. But essentially what I want to do is, in one way or the other, I want to move any layers that are listed here that need to be part of my existing surface, or what I would say is existing takeoff entities, okay? And I want to move them over to the existing tab. Anything that's on this tab that's elevated is going to be used for my existing ground surface. Anything that's on the design tab that's elevated is going to be used for my proposed surface. All right, so what can I do? I've got, this is a neat little toolbar. I don't use a lot of toolbars, but this one's very handy. So these first three buttons let me select entities in the drawing to change the layers over from other to existing or other to design or whatever. So set layer for existing. I'm going to put a crossing window here. So it's going to take, if I have more than one layer for my contours and my labels, I've just moved them over to be part of my existing surface. So if we look at that, you can see it was just one layer, but it's moved it from here over to here. Now, that's handy if I don't know the name of the layer. If I do know the name of the layer, so for instance, I have two layers that are existing fence and existing trees that are going to be removed or demolished, and I want to move those over to the existing tab. So set that to existing, hit move, and they're showing up here. Okay. So I'm just going to take this same step here, and I've got a little bit of a cheat sheet of what I need to move over of my the layers that are currently on that other tab. I need to move some of them over to design so that I can get my design surface and any quantities that go along with it. So my 2D back of curb, again, I said I want to use that for my linear footage so I can get that. Oops, not that one. I'm going to have 3D back of curb. I'm going to have 3D edge of pavement, 3D pad, 3D wall, and then limits, okay? So this is going to be linear footage of my back of curb. These are all elevated, so they're going to be part of my design surface. So I'm going to change this to design. Oops, change it to design. Move to, and that's here. It's important to save here because what you're doing is you're saving all this data into this TRG. It's a target file. I haven't really done anything in this drawing. This is where the changes are being saved. So this is important. If you save or archive or have to send this to somebody else, you want to send the drawing plus this target file. Are there any questions on this? All right. So let's set this up for my quantity report. So on my existing tab, report, yes or no. I do want to report my fence. Now I can get specific. I can say remove fence. I want to measure this as linear footage, and I'll just change this to a length. Okay. Maybe I say remove 6 foot chain link fence. So yes, it's going to be on my report now. My trees. These are going to be a count. I'm going to say remove trees, and I'm going to count it here, and that's it. So they'll be on my report now. Now, my design, I said this has a 0 elevation. For the most part, it was really just used with my spot elevations to elevate to this layer. But I'm going to let this do double duty, and I'm going to have it measure 24-inch curb. And I'll do a linear unit length. Let's see. 3D EOP, that's the one that's closed here. So it is going to be able to give me a volume quantity. So if it's closed, I will let it do an area. I'm going to say this is pavement. My volumes are going to be cubic yards measured in inches. If I have tonnage for this, if I have a density for this, it'll report tonnage. But maybe I've got 2 inches of asphalt and stone, I'll say 8 inches. And then for pads, I'll just do building. Again, these are closed polylines. So I can do that. 4 inches. And if it's the same stone, I can it'll combine the report here for me. And that's pretty much it for my subgrades. I'm going to hit save and exit. The other thing I forgot to do, now that I've got everything sorted onto those different layers, now I can use these other 3 buttons to toggle the display of these different layer groupings. So if I toggle off the other drawing display, you can see that cleaned up a lot. We're not quite sure what went away. If I turn off the existing, what I'm left with are the entities. It should just be anything elevated here is going to be used for my proposed surface. So I can view this in 3D. Oh, I had something wrong. Drawing viewer. Okay. Now, I also want to check a couple things. I'm going to go in, I'm going to add in information as well for topsoil, but I'm going to handle that a little bit differently. So before I get to that point, let's check some of our areas. So if I look back at my checklist, the next thing that it wants me to do is to set that boundary polyline. So since I've got it here, I'm going to go ahead and set my boundary. So boundary polyline, let's set, and it's here. And there's no hard and fast rule whether that needs to be on existing or design. So it's 0 elevation, so it doesn't necessarily matter. But one thing I like about this, you can do all the reporting you need to do, but it also gives you some visual checks. For instance, I can go to boundary polyline, and if I'm not sure if I picked the right one, I can hatch my boundary area. So there may be an area that you excluded. So you don't just have to have one inclusion area. You can have some areas that are not part of this. You may have a hole in the middle that's not going to be disturbed. So you can use more than one polyline for this. But by being able to display and hatch it like that, you're sure of what the software is going to be counting for you. So I can go in and erase that boundary hatch. I can do the same thing with my subgrade areas. So if I go and hatch my subgrade areas, I have 2. So my pavement areas and my building areas. We'll just do one at a time. So that's what it's going to count as my pavement area. I'm good with that. Let me just go right back into it and let's see what it looks like for my buildings. And I can change hatch if I want to. Maybe I just change the color. And I can live with that. That's good as well. Okay. So I like being able to see that, because when you just see numbers on a report, unless something's way out, may not get what you want. So let's go in and erase my subgrade hatches. And while I'm here, I'm also going to add in and define my topsoil area. So if we look, this is something we can do. So I'm not going to get into all the different things that we can do in the program today, but areas of interest. Okay, so if you've got, special sections, wetlands areas, or really, bad soils or protected areas, different things. You can define all that here. Special fill areas. It does do over excavate is going to be parts of this that you can only do in construction. These are some of the things that you cannot do in Carlson Civil. So if over excavates, in your wheelhouse, just kind of keep that in mind. But let's go ahead and show topsoil removal and replacement. So I can set the depths right up front. Now I've got a chance to override this, but just overall, I'm going to say I'm going to remove 1 foot and replace 1/2 foot. And then it's all the same thing. Now I've got some special layers, and some of these layers, some are on the other other tab. Some are on design. I actually don't need these labels, so I'm just going to get rid of those for now. But because I was very, distinct when I did my layers, I knew what I needed. So these are all the polylines that are going to define where I want my topsoil to be placed. So these are, I think it's called regional logic. So the software uses it like a hatch pattern. And so it looks in between closed polylines for where it's going to place topsoil. Okay. So first we'll go to removal. So set my topsoil removal polyline. Well, I'm just going to end up removing everything inside my boundary area. And I am going to set my replacement polylines, everything on here. So in between each of these, so this is in back of curb. So in between the outer boundary and the building polylines and the curb polylines, it knows it's going to replace topsoil here. And then in between the next 2 polylines, it knows it will not replace. In between the next 2, it will. Inside the interior when it will not. I've also got polylines here. Oh, I didn't do it. So I'm just going to put a window here. Now, I've got that check again. So I've got the way to hatch my topsoil removal area. Good. And I'll erase that. And then this is going to be the one that I really need to check, is to hatch the replacement areas. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. This is where I need to consider replacing topsoil, even inside my planted areas. Any questions? Okay, so let's go ahead and remove that hatch. And I'm ready to go ahead and run everything. So if I look back at my project checklist, I need to make my existing surface, and then make my design, and then calculate my volumes. So I just go 1, 2, 3 right down. So make existing ground surface. I'm just going to click that. It sets the file name. It's going to apply my topsoil removal. Does everything behind the scenes. It uses anything that's elevated on the existing tab, anything on those layers. Next, make design surface. Again, it uses anything on the design tab, anything that's elevated. Then it's going to basically build that surface using the subgrade depths underneath my building pads, underneath my pavement. And then it also stops short and then does the topsoil replacement. So it's done all that. Let me calculate total volumes. Let's see what this report looks like. Okay. Standard report, all this. Okay. All right, so it's a very complete report. You can see all my topsoil removal volume, cut volume, fill volume. Gives you a lot of information here. In addition, if we go to material quantities and just look at the standard report, I'm going to run it for the whole drawing because everything in here is good for me. And this is where I can see my quantity. So you do want to have, make sure it's that clean drawing. I've got different symbols here, but these are my trees. Length of 20, there's 3 polylines of curb. Okay, so clean drafting is a key. Make sure you know there should be 3 polylines. Okay, I don't have the right layers showing up here, but remove 6-foot chain link fence. All right. So all the details that I need, skip 33 entities. I think these are all trees. But what we can do is go back. I'm going to turn everything off or on again. Okay. And it kind of resets everything based on the layers. Turn the existing. Yeah, so all those trees weren't counted because they were outside the boundary. Okay, so what else can we do? We've got surface tools. I've got a surface inspector. So what's neat about this is that it loads in and gives you kind of logical names because, you've got different surfaces here. You've got the existing before topsoil is stripped and you have existing after topsoil is stripped. Unadjusted design means finished final grade, and then target design is before the subgrade. Okay. So you can kind of see here what the different elevations are based on where my mouse is sitting. So where I'm sitting now, it's taking into account topsoil stripping, my finished grade elevations, and then 10 inches of subgrade, I think. Here it's taking into account topsoil stripping and then topsoil replacement is all. Any questions? Okay. Under takeoff, surface tools, yep, okay. So you can do cut fill centroids. This is going to be helpful if you're trying to figure out mass haul and diagrams. You can, this is weird to me, cut fill map legend. Just going to put the legend in even though I don't have the map yet. When you're in takeoff, under display, you can see, so this is kind of the same as this toolbar here. But just from here, I can turn on the cut and fill labels or contours or a color map. And so there's my color map. And then just as easy, I'll just turn it back off. I can do a 3D drive simulation. So I can just pick my starting point and it loads in the correct surface for me. I don't know what kind of colors I've got, shading elevation, I guess. Run. Got my UPS truck going here. But you can see, well, this is also elevated, not elevated, exaggerated. Settings. Yeah, it's not exaggerated much. But yeah, you can see where it's cut out for pavement and subgrade. Let me go ahead. Sometimes this takes a little bit, but I'll go ahead while I'm here and show you those centroids. So minimum region volume, you can change this. Let me change that to like 500. It's going to show me my boundaries, but it's kind of neat popping those labels in. And yeah, it's still taking a minute. Oh, I know something else I'm going to make sure I touch on. Gosh, it's working on it. Well, I didn't get what I was looking for. Well, I think it took longer. I had it set to 100. Maybe 500 was too much. I was just trying to shorten the time. Let me see if I can do that one more time. Okay, it's still taking a minute. There we go. Oh, okay. Well, at 100, there were still only 3 areas, so that wasn't bad. Okay, so you can see how it kind of lays this stuff out for me. All right, do a quick save. Now, let's just see. Now, I haven't done this much, so I've had to just dig into a couple things here recently, and I'm probably going to bomb out, so this is not going to be a good example. But let's try to put in a couple drill holes. So I have switched over, to GeoTech, and just going to make up some data. So if you go to define drill hole, if you are doing work in the same area, you can go in and just kind of predefine the different kinds of materials that you have. So I'm going to do strat elevation. So I've got, I don't have the depth or anything at this point. And do strat elevation. I just noticed that was wrong. So I've just got this set up to prompt me for the dirt depth, clay, and then rock. It's going to default that last thickness, let's say 10 feet. And that's just should just make it for trying to figure out some kind of a rock or a quantity underneath. Just basically rock all the way down kind of thing. And let's just pick OK. All right, so that's our default drill hole. And then I am going to place my drill holes here. I'm just going to put in a couple, just enough to say we're going to do here. Depth to the bottom of the strata dirt, let's say that we've got 18 inches. And then depth, we'll say 3 feet. And you can see what we've got here. It's using the surface elevation. I think we're good. Maybe I'm going to call this drill hole 1. Save that. And then I'll just do another one, maybe over here at my driveway. And we'll just say 2 feet. I'll do 4 feet. Save that. And the soil, we'll just do that. And then strata calculations, I can make my strata surfaces. All right, and then this is the trick. I think I'm just going to go back over to Carlson Construction and remake my surfaces. I don't know if I actually need to do that. And do my calculate total volumes. This is where I'm crossing my fingers. I think that's all I need to do to get that to show up on my report. There we go. So it gives you, so Carlson, you know, their strength and where they started really is in the mining industry. And so if there's anything that you need to do surface modeling volume wise, anything like that, if you can't find it, definitely just call into Carlson help, tech support, and they should be able to help you out on that. Any questions? All right, so let's see if we can find our way through doing a little trench. I may just have to, it's been so long since I've done this, and I honestly just forgot I was supposed to show that today. So I do have this. So I'm just going to put in a couple runs. Let's just maybe start up here. So if I blow up on this, I will redo it. I probably should just say I'm going to do that, but all right. So let's look under trench, and I am going to, I think, input a trench line. And I'll do it by points. I will connect it to a trench network. Default rim to surface elevation. In this case, I'm not sure if I really want to do that. In this case, I think I'm just going to put this one, and this one in. So I should be able to set it to that one, which is going to be my finish ground. System name, I think that's right. Pick my trench starting point. Now, I'm going to go here and started at a station 0. My manhole ID is going to be SSMH5. Invert in elevation. I'm going to do and set my out at the same. My next trench point, so far so good, is going to be SSMH4. Invert in 286.80, 286.7. Pipe size tells me 8 inches. And then my next point, I'm just going to go to here. And this will be SSMH3. Let's see, 286.4. Got a second in, and then 284.9. And this will be 8 inch as well. And I think I'm just going to leave it at that. See what we got. So we have, everything seems to be flowing the direction it is. Oh, I could have done one more. Okay. Anyway, let's just go with this. If I need to edit anything, so if I entered anything wrong, I could go in here, got my pipe size, I think all that's good. This is pretty easy. It's just been so long since I've done it. Input edit trench template. So let's go ahead and set this up. So this is going to be just a template of our trench. So we'll put today's date. All right, so my bottom offset, I think I'm just going to set it. This is in feet, so I'm going to do half a foot below my pipe invert, and we'll start off with 2 inches wide and 2 feet wide, and we'll start off at 3 feet deep. And then we're going to lay those back at a 1-to-1. We're going to display, we want to see it as a pipe. Pipe size, we'll show it as 8 inches. And that's just for the display here. So if it changes through, it'll be fine. Add pipe diameter. No. And then I'm just going to set my fill material down here, just generic. I'm just going to call it bedding 1. We'll do bedding 2. And you can see it's actually showing up here. And I'll do this at 3. Nope, I've only got 3 feet deep, so let's do 2 feet. There we go. Save that, exit. And then I can draw that if I want. I can do trench network quantities. All trench line, let's see, calculate cut volumes. This is what I was thinking of. I want to minimize that. So minimize my existing and design. So when it does this, I want to report the depth summary, and I think that's it. It's honestly been so long since I've had to do this. Main template, it's going to be that one. What did I do? Oh, I know what I did. Set up my depth zones. There we go. So my first one, let's just do to 4 feet, and then we'll do 6 feet, and then we'll just do 8, and then over. There we go. Haha. That went better than I thought, so I'm happy with that. I'll do better next time. My apologies. So there are my different manholes. So it's pretty easy. But if I'm not mistaken, let's just double check something. That's the last that I had, if anybody has any questions. But I was thinking, let's switch to civil and see if we can cheat a little bit. Aha, pipe depth summary. So in civil, you can do a pipe depth summary under profiles. So, aha, there we go. So I think I'd have to change this. So, but you can do some of this from civil. The other thing I did want to point out, and let's look at together, is under takeoff graphic report. So this is the other thing, that this is a menu you can do in takeoff that you're not able to do in construction that you can't do from civil, from the SiteNet menu. Any questions? All right. Well, again, my apologies for starting late. So at least I got on and it didn't crash out on me in the middle. Thank you all. I hope everybody's having a good week or had a good week. I hope you are looking forward to a good weekend, and who knows what Halloween's like for anybody this year. But just follow up with me again if you have any questions, if you want that PowerPoint, or if you want access to any of the old webinars. So thanks everybody and have a good weekend. Bye-bye.